Amid the trade uncertainty, we are getting some optimistic news on how consumers feel about the economy. New data released today by the University of Michigan shows an improvement in consumer sentiment and cooling inflation. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt reacted to that and the latest personal consumption expenditures index today, saying in part, today's economic report follows multiple robust jobs reports, below expectation inflation reports, and a strong bump in consumer confidence. President Trump continues to prove doomsday experts wrong with his America First economic agenda. Okay, let's go to CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady joining us once again from the New York Stock Exchange. Kelly, we have new consumer sentiment data. What is it telling us?
So the consumer sentiment data was actually flat this month, and that's basically saying that consumers feel the same as they did about the economy last month. But this does follow 4 months of this survey showing that consumer sentiment plunged. And remember, this is a survey that tracks how people feel about the economy, their personal finances, inflation, the job market. So sort of the way to read this is things didn't get worse, which we did expect because of all this back and forth with the tariff policy, but they also didn't get better. Now, the White House, the statement that you just read, I mean, they are right. We got inflation data that showed things are coming down today. The consumer confidence, which is different than the consumer sentiment, I think that Caroline Leavitt was referencing, the consumer confidence data that we got on Tuesday did show a bump. But overall, what we are basically getting from this report today is consumers didn't feel worse. Their perspective on things didn't get worse because of all of this trade deal optimism that happened in May with China and the U.S. coming together with that UK trade deal. I think the important thing to note, though, is that this has all been called into question over the last 24 hours, especially with China and with where tariffs are going. So you don't have that uncertainty reflected in this data, Mugo.
Okay. And Kelly, the Fed's preferred inflation measure shows inflation is cooling, but it also shows a drop in consumer spending. So we have some good news on consumer prices, yet people are not really opening up their wallets just yet. So can you help us make sense of this?
Yeah, so the inflation data is very good. This gets us closer to the Fed's 2% target. We came in at 2.1% annually. So yes, prices are still rising, but just at a slower rate. The consumer spending portion of this was interesting because it still rose 0.2%, but that is a sharp fall in growth versus the month prior, which showed an increase of 0.7%. Neither of those numbers were groundbreaking. It does speak to this larger pullback that we have been expecting from consumers. Remember, we saw them front load purchases, myself included, ahead of the tariff deadline. And now we're expecting over the next few months for that to cool a little bit as people enter a wait and see mode. I'll also note that same report showed an increase to 4.9% in the personal savings rate. That's the highest that we have seen in nearly a year. And what that says is people, again, aren't going out and spending as much. They're sort of putting things aside because of all of this uncertainty to come.
Yeah, and Kelly, you partially answered my next question here, but just how much of what we are seeing today in the markets reflects the back and forth over tariffs? Because you had one court ruling that led to the headline that Trump tariffs were on hold, and then another showed Trump's appeal of that ruling reinstated to his, the tariff levels that he wanted. So how does this hit with investors?
Yeah, it's not great. You and I have talked about this all the time, right? Uncertainty. Investors hate that, specifically that word. No one loves to hear it. Right now, I'm just looking at the big board over here. We're down more than we have been for most of the session. We are off session lows with the Dow. We've been all over the place. Like I said, a good inflation reading, but then this back and forth with the legality of the tariffs, as well as the president saying that China isn't holding up its end of the deal. What I'm hearing from investors is they don't like where things are going, where it seems to we have a lack of clarity, even more than before with tariffs, but you weren't seeing things fall off a cliff yet because there is no concrete slapping of a new tariff on another country. It's just more rhetoric than anything right now.
All right. Kelly O'Grady, once again, thank you so much for your time today and happy Friday to you.